This is an overview of what a typical 105 MTS duplex softener system looks like. We have our main controller located in front of the tanks. This controller is electronically connected by communication cable to our control valves. The valves are currently in the downflow configuration. This is the inlet side where the source water enters into the control valve. See the arrow showing the flow. This cover with the 4 bolts that's positioned under the label stating upflow aspirator will need to be swapped out with the aspirator injector housing assembly that is located on the back side of the control valve. You will note of the brine line connection, which will eventually need to be detached prior to performing the swap as well. And then the water is going to flow out the outlet of the control valve through the ball valve out to the surface of the building. Prior to removing the existing downflow aspirator kit with your new upflow aspirator kit, we would ask that you open the contents to ensure that the main upflow programming sheets are included. This way you'll be able to follow these instructions and program the electronic main controller to upflow configuration, as well as the step-by-step instructions on how to remove the downflow aspirator kit and replace it with this new upflow kit. You'll notice on the back side there, that gray piece, that is the new upflow injector assembly that we will have already put into position before it leaves our facilities. And then I was showing you the silicone grease packet that we'll provide as well, as you may have to lube up the 2 O-rings that are sitting on the post, as you can see here. Just a light amount of grease may be applied to both O-rings, and it'll help you actually put it onto the control valve with much more ease. Isolate the softener from the service line by closing the valves located on the inlet side of the control valve, as shown here, as well as the outlet side of the control valve. We have now isolated the tank and it is in full bypass mode. Initiate a regeneration using the main controller. So start by pressing and holding the set reset button for about 3 seconds until it beeps. A screen will appear where you'll press the down arrow to highlight the word yes, and then press the set reset button to initiate a regeneration of the softener. You'll be hearing a clicking noise coming from the valve, which is fine as it is advancing to the backwash position. Once the valve arrives at backwash, let it count down 10 seconds and then press the set reset button, followed by the down button to advance it to the next cycle. You're going to hear the same clicking noise as the valve is advancing to brine draw. Once the valve arrives at brine draw, let it count down about 10 seconds and then press the arrow down button to advance it to fast rinse. Once the valve arrives at fast rinse, again, let it count down approximately 10 seconds and then press the arrow down button to advance it to the refill position. Once the valve arrives at refill, again, let it count down about 10 seconds and then press the arrow down to advance it back to service. You have now completed depressurization of that specific softener tank and control valve. Disconnect the communication cable from the bottom of the 105 power head. The power has now been turned off to this control valve. We now disconnect the brine line by removing the red clip from the aspirator housing and then pull the elbow containing the brine line flow control button away from the valve. Notice the red cage that contains the brine line flow control button as seen here. Please set the red clip and elbow connection aside for later reattachment to the aspirator. Disconnect the solenoid from the aspirator assembly by loosening the nut that is located on top of the solenoid, and then set both the nut and the solenoid aside for later use. Please leave the wires attached to the solenoid. On the back side of the control valve, loosen and remove the 4 long bolts that are holding the aspirator injector body cover in place, and set those bolts aside for later use. Remove the aspirator and injector housing by wiggling it away from the valve body. Be aware water is going to pour out between the valve body and the aspirator housing as seen here. Please be on the lookout for 2 O-rings and possibly a clear check ball. In this case, you'll see the O-ring on this contractor's finger. He caught it as it was pouring out from between the valve body and the aspirator housing. And the second O-ring is located right here. And just please make sure that they're both put into position on the back side of the aspirator housing. On the front side of the control valve, locate the upflow aspirator label and then remove the 4 short bolts that are securely capped to the valve body. Please set aside these 4 bolts for later use. Then, pry away the end cap from the valve body. Please note, water is going to pour out, and keep your eyes open for 2 O-rings. They may fall out, they may still be attached to the end cap, or they may still be within the valve body ports. In this case, both O-rings were still in the valve body ports. Please remove them and place them into position on the end cap as shown here. Take the cap that includes the 2 O-rings and the 4 short bolts that you just removed from the previous step and install the cap on the back side of the control valve where the label states downflow aspirator. We recommend the use of either a nut driver or a screwdriver to hand tighten all 4 screws nice and snug. Please do not use a power drill to tighten the bolts. On the front side of the control valve, install the aspirator injector assembly that contains the new upflow injector set by using the 4 long bolts that you had set aside from step 6. Again, we recommend the use of either a nut driver or a screwdriver to hand tighten all 4 bolts nice and snug. Please do not use a power drill to tighten the bolts. Place the solenoid valve back into position on top of the aspirator housing using the nut to tighten it into place. Place the brining line flow control elbow into the aspirator injector housing by using the red clip that you had set aside earlier to lock it into secure position. Reconnect the communication cable to the valve's power head. Follow the updated programming sheets provided to reprogram the system from downflow to upflow brining. One of the most important steps is to change the valve setup from 105 DF softener setting to 105 upflow softener setting as shown here. Once you've selected it, another screen will appear asking you to confirm the change, where you will press the arrow down button to highlight yes, and then lock it in, and the valve setup is now upflow brining. Also, when you update the times for the regeneration cycles, you will now notice that the softener will be conducting the brine draw first. This is confirmation that it is in upflow brining mode. You're now going to slowly open up the inlet valve to the control valve. Please take your time. There's going to be a lot of pressure of water entering into the valve, and at the same time you want to make sure there are no leaks on the work that you just conducted. By doing so, you can slowly open up that fully wide open, and then open up the outlet valve as well. Nice and slowly, and then this tank is now back online. We're going to initiate a regeneration of the softener tank that you just conducted the rework on. In this case, it is tank number 1 that we need to place in the regeneration. Start by pressing and holding the set reset button for about 3 seconds until it beeps. Highlight the word yes, then press the set reset button to initiate the regeneration. You will hear that clicking noise from the control valve again as it is advancing to the brine draw position. Once the control valve has arrived at brine draw, we need to confirm the softener is drawing brine by unthreading the polytubing compression nut at the brine tank. Then cover the open end of the tube with your finger for about 5 to 10 seconds and feel for suction. The suction confirms that the softener will properly draw brine. However, if you do not feel suction, then you're going to have to check for blockages from the aspirator and injector assembly all the way to the end of this polytubing. If all's good, then thread the compression nut back into the air check safety float assembly as shown. Once the upflow brine draw stage has been confirmed to be successful, you may either let the regeneration run its full course, or you may advance through the cycles back to the service position so that you may conduct the rework on the control valves, if applicable. Please note that if you decide to skip through the regeneration steps, please ensure to stay on fast rinse for the full cycle in order to remove any possible brine that may be inside the mineral tank. If you decide to skip through the regenerations, it is important to conduct a full regeneration later on that day to ensure that full capacity is restored for each mineral tank. If applicable, you may repeat these steps on subsequent control valves. In this case, we had already conducted the rework on control valve number 2, and this duplex softener system will now look like this with the aspirator injector assemblies positioned on the front of each control valve.
Visit us at www.caniturewg.com or call us toll-free at 1-877-288-9888.